and welcome to Indus News Live from Islamabad. I'm Hira Mustafa and these are the headlines. Israel has continued to bombard Gaza Strip with airstrikes and artillery shells, ignoring international calls for calm. Medics say more than 110 Palestinians, including 31 children, have been killed in Israeli aggression so far. The Israeli military has also stepped up the deployment of troops and tanks near the besieged Palestinian enclave. Meanwhile, the U.S. blocked today's public virtual meeting of the UN Security Council to address the Gaza conflict. U.S. envoy said the council will meet on Sunday instead, as waiting for a few days would have effect diplomatically. India has recorded 4,000 deaths from COVID-19 and more than 343,000 infections in the past 24 hours. In Pakistan, over 2,500 people tested positive and 48 died overnight, taking the death toll to 19,384. Globally, the virus has claimed over 3.3 million lives and infected more than 160.8 million people. Myanmar's military government has declared martial law in Western Chin State MINDAT region after attacks by a militia. However, pro-democracy activists have continued their protests in many cities despite violent crackdown. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has again condemned Myanmar military's attacks on protesters. Azerbaijan has dismissed Armenia's accusation that its forces violated Armenian territory on its southeastern border areas of Tunis and Sicyon. In a statement, the Azeri Foreign Ministry said it was enforcing its own border and is committed to ease tensions in the region. The two countries remain at loggerheads after a conflict over the Nagorno-Karabakh region that claimed over 5,000 lives last year. Well, those were the headlines. News in detail coming after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now, the news in detail. Israel has continued to bombard Gaza Strip with airstrikes and artillery shells, ignoring international calls for calm. Medics say more than 110 Palestinians, including 31 children, have been killed in Israeli aggression so far. Despite calls from the international community for an end to the deadly offensive against Palestinians, Israeli forces defied all norms of international law and humanity and continued assaults on the Gaza Strip. The Israeli military has stepped up the deployment of troops and tanks near the besieged Palestinian enclave. 2 infantry and 1 armored unit have been positioned near the Gaza border, while Tel Aviv has also called 7,000 army reservists. However, U.S. President Joe Biden said he is pressing for a halt to violence in Gaza and Jerusalem. Meanwhile, addressing the U.S. Congress, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib called the Israeli administration an apartheid government. Tlaib, daughter of Palestinian immigrants, broke into tears during her moving speech over Israel's oppression and occupation.
We must condition aid to Israel on compliance with international human rights and end the apartheid. We must, with no hesitation, demand that our country recognize the unconditional support of Israel has enabled the erasure of Palestinian life and the denial of the rights of millions of refugees.
Meanwhile, the U.S. blocked today's public virtual meeting of the UN Security Council to address the Gaza conflict. Diplomats say the council will meet on Sunday instead, after U.S. envoy argued waiting for a few days would allow for diplomacy to have some effect. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation will also hold an emergency meeting on Sunday to discuss the deadly unrest. As violence escalated in Gaza, tension has also spread to mixed communities of Jews and Arabs in Israel, a new front in the long conflict. Jewish groups attacked people and damaged shops, hotels, and cars overnight. Israeli occupying forces, meanwhile, have arrested over 400 Palestinians over the past 24 hours. The protests in different parts of the world are continuing against Israeli aggression and in solidarity with Gazans. Amid the violence, international airlines, including KLM, British Airways, and Virgin Atlantic, have suspended services to Israel. India has recorded 4,000 deaths from COVID-19 and more than 343,000 infections in the past 24 hours. Globally, the virus has claimed over 3.3 million lives and infected more than 160.8 million people. Details in this report. The variant first detected in India is alarmingly spreading across the world. UK cases of Indian variant have more than doubled in the past week, as Prime Minister Boris Johnson says his government won't rule out anything to curb the spread. The World Health Organization experts say this variant has been found in 8 countries of the Americas, including Canada and the US. With no signs of coronavirus numbers decreasing in India, Mumbai crematoriums are overburdened by a spike in demand. Workers say about 90% of the bodies coming in for funerals nowadays are packed in body bags. Meanwhile, several states in India have reported a vaccine shortage, with some centers standing completely empty.
At the last moment, there's another information which says it is stopped indefinitely. So this is definitely a little alarming situation, or a panic situation, and probably a little more better logistic or better plan should have been done to cover this kind of a population.
As in Brazil, a Senate commission investigates whether President Jair Bolsonaro's government mishandled the pandemic. Pfizer's chief executive told lawmakers the company got no response from Brazil's health ministry to its repeated offers to supply vaccine last year. Meanwhile, over in the US, CDC issued new guidance saying fully vaccinated people do not need to wear masks outdoor and can avoid wearing them indoors in most places. US President Joe Biden celebrated the announcement, but cautiously.
We still have too many unvaccinated people. We have to get to 70% of adults started on vaccinations by July the 4th. And we have to take this pandemic, tackle it, not just here, but overseas as well, to truly be safe in the long run.
Mainland China has reported 7 new COVID-19 cases, including its first local transmissions in more than 3 weeks. Japan says it will declare a state of emergency in 3 more prefectures in a surprise move reflecting growing concerns about the virus spread. In Pakistan, 48 more people have lost their lives to COVID-19 over the past 24 hours. The health ministry says the nationwide death toll has reached 19,384. The ministry registered just above 2,500 infections overnight. It said the caseload has crossed 873,000, out of which more than 780,000 have recovered. The number of active infections in the country is over 73,000. The ministry said 4,330 patients are in critical condition. Myanmar's military government has declared martial law in western Chin State's MINDAT region after alleged attacks by a militia. State media said about 100 people attacked a police station using homemade guns, while about 50 targeted the state bank. It said that the security forces had repelled the attack without suffering any casualties. A spokesperson for a newly formed militia, the Chinland Defense Force, said it was behind the latest fighting. He said one of the fighters from the force was killed, while clashes are continuing with the army bringing in reinforcements. Meanwhile, pro-democracy activists have continued their protests in many cities despite violent crackdown. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has again condemned the Myanmar military's attacks on protesters. Baku has dismissed Yerevan's accusation that Azeri forces violated Armenian territory on its southeastern border areas. In a statement, Azeri Foreign Ministry said Armenia's allegations are provocative. The ministry said it is enforcing its own border and is committed to ease tensions in the region. It said Azeri officials have been in talks with Armenian border guards to normalize the situation. The ministry noted it is unacceptable that the Armenian officials are using this issue for political purposes before their election. Earlier, Armenia's defense ministry accused Azerbaijan of moving forces 3 kilometers into its territory. It said the Azeri forces try to ensure positional advance in border areas of Vardanis and Sisian. The two countries remain at loggerheads after a conflict over the Nagorno-Karabakh region that claimed over 5,000 lives last year. Meanwhile, U.S. State Department spokesperson Ned Price said Washington is closely monitoring the situation. In the U.S. state of Rhode Island, at least 9 people have been wounded after gunfire from a vehicle targeted a home in Providence. Police say 3 of those wounded are in critical condition. Providence Police Chief Hugh Clemens said several dozens of shots were fired from as many as 5 guns. Talking to reporters, Clemens said police are familiar with 2 groups involved in the shooting. However, no arrests have been made so far as the investigation is in its early stages. South Korea says it is considering ways to hold bilateral consultations with Japan on its Fukushima water release plans. Korean Foreign Ministry termed bilateral consultation necessary apart from IAEA-led verification process. The ministry said it plans to request Japan to hold joint consultations of experts from both countries on the issue. They urged Tokyo to ensure participation of South Korean experts in the IAEA monitoring. Seoul has expressed concerns over Tokyo's plan to release over 1.2 million tons of radioactive water into the Indian Ocean. Former Maldives President Mohammed Nasheed has been flown to Germany for further medical treatment after last week's assassination attempt. Nasheed has been in intensive care after a bomb attack outside his home in the capital Mali. The Speaker of Parliament underwent 16 hours of surgery to remove shrapnel from his lungs, abdomen and liver. Police have arrested 3 men in connection with the attack and are searching for others involved in the attack. No group has yet claimed responsibility for the attack. U.S. President Joe Biden says the Colonial Pipeline is close to reaching full operational capacity as of now. Biden added that he expects to see fuel normalcy starting this weekend. Biden said his administration has taken steps such as sending fuel to gas stations that will help fill the tanks of 5 million vehicles. He also urged customers not to get more gas than they need and warned fuel stations against price gouging. Biden also said he does not believe Moscow was behind the attack, but that those who were involved in the attack were based in Russia. Earlier this week, Colonial Pipeline began to slowly restart the nation's largest fuel pipeline network after a ransomware attack shut the pipeline. At least 17 African migrants have drowned in a shipwreck off Tunis as they tried to cross the Mediterranean from Libya to Italy. Rescue officials said the Tunisian Coast Guard rescued 2 Nigerian women in waters of the southern town Azarzis. They said the ship embarked from Zavia in Libya with 19 migrants on board. Last month, at least 40 migrants drowned off Tunisia's port of Sfax. The UN says at least 300 people have perished in the central Mediterranean crossing this year while trying to reach Europe. At least 18 elephants have been killed after a thunderstorm struck India's northeastern Assam state. Locals found the carcasses of the elephants in a forest in Nagoon district of the state. Assam Forest Minister Parimal Suklabadia said the carcasses were sent for postmortem and an investigation is underway. India has over 50% of its Asiatic elephants, but their population has declined in recent years due to habitat fragmentation and erratic enforcement of forest laws. More news stories coming up after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Asian shares have risen after Wall Street put the brakes on a 3-day losing streak. Federal Reserve officials also calmed investors' jitters over accelerating U.S. inflation. Japan's Nikkei 225 is leading the gains, jumping over 2%. Stocks in mainland China ascended over 1.5%. Seoul's Kospi has risen over 1%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index has added close to 1%. The ASX 200 in Australia has gained more than 0.5%. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.